You know, what if he doesn't do the same things that Trey Lance does? All right. You want me to just continue where we were starting off right
Yeah,
before?
yeah, just keep going off. I love this Zach Wilson slander because can I just say, can I just call it? You got to call your your Garrett Wilson. I'm calling from the moment I saw Zach Wilson, I was like, that does not look good. You know, I'm a big, I know. And now in the NFL, we go by the traits, but
Yeah.
I, I, I really don't like. I'm a big between the ears. The game is still about between the ears for the
Yeah.
quarterbacks. You know, Tom Brady can still play because it's what's happening up here, you know? And I never saw that with Zach Wilson. He always and I think this is Zach Wilson's thing, and it speaks to him running the ball and getting hurt. I
Mhm.
think he's afraid to get hit. I really do.
And that, you get hit once in the NFL, you get hurt once in the NFL, you're kind of starting to try to avoid it. I mean, we've heard this stuff with Jimmy Garoppolo this year. That guy started kind of not believing in Jimmy Garoppolo as a leader because he didn't want to play because he was injured.
Hmm.
So we heard that from Martellus Bennett. Edelman kind of confirmed a little bit of that. So, I sometimes with those guys, it becomes like, listen, man, I keep getting injured. Andrew Luck retired because of that kind of stuff. So when it comes to that stuff, I don't discount it that it's not in the back of their mind. Um,
Oh
I
no,
was
no,
saying
no.
that before with Zach
If
Wilson, though.
if you
But
didn't do that, like that's what
yeah,
normal people do.
yeah,
Normal people are afraid to get hurt.
yeah,
That's completely normal. But to be a quarterback, you have to be a psychopath
that's
and
true.
and ignore that a 300-pound man is trying to flatten you.
Yes,
You know?
and I think my thing with Zach Wilson with that is, um, not even that. What I was going to say about the because you're talking about the in between the ears stuff. I agree with you. That's sometimes stuff we don't even have access to. Like we don't actually know how good this guy is on the chalkboard. He
Hmm.
could have been amazing, but if you can't make that throw within a certain amount of time, then it doesn't matter. If you ask him to point it out on a chalkboard and what his reads are, he could probably do that amazingly. And if he's
Hmm.
sitting there and he's telling you like, oh, I got to throw it to that guy, that's great. But in action live play, we never saw him deal with a lot of pressure in college. And I think what's going to end up happening is I think if the offensive line had been healthy and played well, we'd be talking differently about Zach Wilson. Um, because I think he would have had the time and he would have been able to sit there and go, okay, who can I get it out to? Some of it might also be play design or how he's being taught the read concepts, but I do think a lot of it is an in between the ears thing with him. And just that you need to, like, again, your awareness of what's going on around you. The reason why it's not as big of a deal for Justin Fields is Justin Fields has the X factor of athleticism. Same thing with Trey Lance. I mean, Justin Fields, when he tested so well. I'm like, dude, why does nobody want this guy? Why is this the guy falling to being the fourth or fifth quarterback off the board in this draft? This guy he was running in the 4.4s.
Yeah.
He's like 230.
And you
Oh,
see and you see all four of them on the field, man.
oh,
He's
he looks
fast.
Dude, he looks even faster than that now. He
Yeah.
looks faster than and he's thicker than Lamar Jackson. Like that's the thing
Yeah.
that people forget. Lamar Jackson didn't test. He was like, I think a part of it was just kind of like not showing your cards.
Hmm.
The other part was he didn't have an agent to force him to test and tell him like, listen, this is going to help your stock, not hurt your stock. But because he didn't test, I think some people might have been a little confused about that. And we don't have that linear 40 time to base it on. But you also have the tape from when he was in college and playing for Louisville and just making everybody look like an idiot on the field. The
Hmm.
difference is Fields is just a thick beast. He's the closest thing to Cam Newton of the last like since Cam Newton. Like
Yeah,
everybody
definitely.
else is similar to Cam Newton. But that was why, like, I almost thought that was why when he was going in the draft, I thought the Patriots were going to try and get him because like they had Cam Newton at the time, and he looked exactly like Cam Newton. He threw like Cam Newton, had a great deep ball like Cam Newton,
Yeah, the
and
the the Justin Fields thing, I think, man, I think that the Ohio State guys, they have some real stink on them.
that's true. I mean,
I
like
think it
Haskins was just a couple years before that. People kind of
mm,
had their stink on Haskins. There's been quite a few of those dudes from Ohio State.
yeah.
They don't have to face a lot of big competition, and when he did, I think people had question with his processing. With
Hmm.
I think when he played Indiana, people had
Yeah,
some
whenever he got
questions.
that real pressure, he threw some picks, and that's straight up. Like I
Well, it was
remember
when
those games, and he did make some ugly throws, and he did come to pressure.
but he also adjusted in those games too. And that was the thing I think people underrated was, okay, he had some bad throws, he had some bad situations in those games, like the Indiana game. And I think part of it was he just wasn't used to people blitzing him a lot. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden they were blitzing a lot and he didn't adapt to it. But it also comes down to, did the coaching adapt to it? Because the
Mm-hmm.
coaching's not used to, hey, they're going to throw all these kind of cool pressure looks at us. And so
Mm-hmm.
his couple of games that looked really bad in college were usually when they were trying to do these exotic blitzes. Well,
Mm-hmm.
guess who didn't have to deal with exotic blitzes at all? Zach Wilson. So it was like you're comparing apples and oranges anyway. And then the people who are comparing Justin Fields' worst game in college are not comparing that. Like they're sitting there being like, well, Zach Wilson didn't have this problem. And I think the issue with a lot of this is you just got to learn to adapt, like, and adjust your thinking going forward. It's learning.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's learning every couple of years. I remember a few years ago, everybody loved Josh Rosen. He was the number one pick in a lot of people's draft boards in the draft community. And where is he now? Like, he's not, people learn, they adapt, they go, you
Yeah.
know what? Maybe the athletic guy is actually a better guy to have. Like, you start adjusting to what you like. And then also the other thing is, again, I say it before, I say, we don't know the in between the ears. We don't get to meet these guys a lot of the time. Even Zach Wilson gets flacked right now because of things he says in the media, but a lot of the time it's either taken out of context or it's not as bad as people make it sound.
Oh yeah, of
The real
course.
problem is just the play on the field. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but we also don't know if he is a leader of men in that locker room. We don't really know any of that stuff because we're not there. We're not
Yeah.
talking to him and we don't know what's going on between the ears.
But the thing is that the Jets did, and I hate this, they put the C on his chest. No matter if he's a good leader of men or not, the Jets chose to put the C on Zach Wilson's chest. And that means you got to be the leader.
Wasn't that usually on the Jets? Is that not a player choice? I know
Yeah, that's a
some.
player choice. But I'm wondering, was he really a leader, or did they just do that because you're a quarterback?
I get that. I understand what you're saying. I don't know. That's one of those things when people make a big deal about the captain being on the chest or not. It's one of those things I tune out very quickly because I go, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what's going on in that locker room. We saw it this year with Tua Tagovailoa and all that stuff that was going on at the beginning of the season. They're going like, he's not a captain, he's not a leader. And then you have Tyreek Hill going out to the media, standing up for him, and it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of nice to see Tyreek Hill stand up for the guy. But and then they're all talking about him being the captain and this thing and that thing. Oh, did Mike McDaniel make them do that? So,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, like, we saw steps forward from Tua. And we clearly saw a Tua that looked a lot before the concussions, looked a lot more mentally healthy
He was a
and
good
happy in
player,
his
man.
situation.
He was
Yeah.
I think he was one of the 10 best quarterbacks this year when he was healthy.
To be fair, this year was not a great year for quarterbacks. That's not a high bar because, like, if you look at this year, there's like 64
Yeah.
different starting quarterbacks. A lot of quarterbacks did not play well. I do think he played really well, by the way. Like, I do think he played really well. And part of that is what did we have? We had a great coach come into that room, make
Mm-hmm.
everything easier for him, gave him RPOs, did a lot of pre-snap motion, at the snap motion, very defined reads, play action, all
Awesome
those things.
weapons.
Yeah, great weapons, getting him Tyreek Hill, already having Jalen Waddle in the room. But you also saw that with the Giants and Brian Dable and Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones didn't look amazing this year, but they made it to the playoffs because they were able to find a way to make a functioning offense with Daniel Jones because, one, the defense played really well for them too when they probably weren't supposed to. They were playing undermanned at talent on defense, but Wink Martindale did some crazy things there. They have good defensive line, but the back end, they were playing guys who like just got out of college. They pulled in a couple of good dudes last minute at the start of the season. But you look at what they did. They focus on what guys could do well. Again, another team that led the league in RPOs, pre-snap motion, at the snap motion, play action, and making things easier for your quarterback. Is, I think, so important. That's what coaching should be. If you're a coordinator, your job is to make the day in the life of your quarterback a lot easier. And then what you want from your quarterback is when we can't do it, when we can't make it easier for you, you have to perform. And that's the real difference maker there is, can you perform when it hasn't been asked of you? Like when we're asking the most of you, when I screw up at my job or where I can't cheat for you. I always saw a lot of those coordinators and coaches before who were like, we're going to run ISO routes and it's going to be, there's no play action and we're not doing any pre-snap motion. And like, not to get me wrong, like, I do think that there's a reason why some teams don't run as much at the snap motion and pre-snap motion. And it's just because it takes coaching and time to teach that. And you don't want to run the risk of getting those penalties of, illegal shift or a false start, which I do think I think some teams, that's why they shy away from it. You
Hmm.
saw with the Dolphins, they did get a lot of those penalties this year as well, but they weren't afraid of it because, listen, we're going to keep coaching this. They also brought in guys who knew how to coach it up, right? McDaniels
Yeah.
has done this in the places that he was. Same thing with Kafka coming into the Giants. He was with the Chiefs. Chiefs run a ton of pre-snap and at the snap motion, run a lot of RPOs. So it's all about what you can coach. You look at where guys are coming off from a tree where they don't run a lot of RPOs and they try throwing in RPOs. Sometimes it takes a while to learn how to coach that stuff.
Yeah.
The Browns, for example, I like Stefanski a lot. I think he's a great coach. I think he's a great coordinator. The problem is he is like kind of like the dude who went to the class, not the dude who's teaching the class. He's not Shanahan, he's not Kubiak, but he's the guy who's like learning from those guys. And he does some things that work to himself as well. He loves running the 2 tight end sets, shifting the tight ends around. That works a lot for them because they had some good talent at tight end over there.
Hmm.
But I also think, like, sometimes the play designs aren't always the best. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're leading the league in separation with their guys, and that also helps when you trade for Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick and get him for for peanuts compared to what guys were
Peanuts.
going for this year. So considering what, like, AJ Brown got traded for a 1st-round pick and they had to extend him for $20 million a year.
Yeah.
Amari Cooper went for a 5th-round pick and you didn't have to extend for $20 million, like for $25 million a year. So
It was a
they
steal.
got
The
away with a
steal of
lot on
steals.
that.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest steals of last year. And I, again, considering how crazy wide receiver got the last year, I think that's a move that's going to look better and better as you go down the line because Amari Cooper's a really good player. So,
Yeah.
I think the coach's job is to make things easier for the players, and the player's job is to eventually execute when when things break down, but also execute within the realm of the offense.
Yeah. And I felt like to an extent the Jets did not make life easier for Zach, and
Yeah,
Zach did not make life easier for them.
exactly. And I
You
think that's
know?
why they went to Mike White.
Yeah.
And you saw Mike White when things were working in the offense kind of work. Now, granted, his first game was against the Bears. It was
Yeah.
really unfair to Zach Wilson to have like his worst game against the Patriots, and then the next week you play Mike White against the Bears, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna get a
Let's
lot of like blow ups about this, but it's really not the same defense they're playing against.
exactly. I'm not gonna I'm not a White. I'm not a Mike White guy. I'm gonna be honest.
That's
I
fair. He's
you know,
probably like I said before, he's like a Taylor Heineke kind of guy.
yeah,
Like,
I see him as like a, high-end backup. Maybe like, he's like Case Keenum. He can win you like 2 games. If your quarterback's out and you need him for 3 games, he can win you 2 of them. I'm telling you that. He's a gutsy guy. He'll stay in the pocket and he'll get lasered. He's really smart between the ears, but I I do not see starting. I don't see starting potential.
so my question for you is, what do they do at the quarterback position going into this? Because it's a weird year. You have a lot of guys out there. Maybe Derek Carr's eligible for a trade. Almost gonna guaranteed be eligible for trade anyway. You have Jimmy Garoppolo, who's going to be a free agent, who's got some familiarity with Mr. LaFleur and Mr.
Yes.
Saleh. There's guys out there like a Mullins who might be a free agent after this year, but I don't know if they're really going to want to, pick up Mick Mullins. I think that means you're doubling down on Zach Wilson,
Yeah.
which I don't think they want to do just yet.
So I have 3 packages. We got
Yeah.
the high end, where this is where we're talking about A-Rod, Lamar Jackson, that sell the farm.
Ooh.
If you can get Lamar Jackson, if you can get Aaron Rodgers, I 2, 3 first-round picks, you do it. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think you can get Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's really on the market. Then there's your middle. This is Jimmy Garoppolo. This is Derek Carr. This is very reasonable, and it's gonna cost something, but this is what you're gonna hopefully get your hands on. Is hopefully get your hands on Derek Carr. Hopefully get your hands on Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well,
And
Garoppolo's
then
just
you
going to be
got
contract, I think.
yeah, but you don't want to pay too much.
Yeah, well,
That's
because you look at the health for him. He's never been a
exactly.
healthy guy. That was always the issue with him. So now all of a sudden you got 2 not healthy quarterbacks.
Yeah. And then there's, you struck out, you effed up, which is, you're talking about Mike White, you're talking about Mullins, you're talking about Geno Smith. No offense to Geno Smith or like a Sam Darnold, but that's,
I
your
also don't think
vibe.
either of those guys want to be back in New York anytime soon.
Yeah, probably not. But you're gonna have to make a run at them if you really F up. And I think, man, you sell out and you try and get Aaron Rodgers, you try and get Tom Brady, you try and get Lamar Jackson. You fight like hell like to get that. And I think giving up 3 first round picks is a small price for a guy like Lamar Jackson.
So what about if Rodgers stays in Green Bay, what about Jordan Love? I have weird feelings on that because I wanted to see more of him. I wanted the Green Bay Packers to suck sooner so we could
Yeah,
see what the fuck Jordan Love was because he looked good for like 30 minutes or whatever it was he played in that
but
one game. And I'm
he's
like, I
going up
want to see
against
more.
prevent defense. We don't truly know.
I know, and I agree. That's the problem. We don't know. And because the Green Bay Packers were like, oh, wait, we're going to try and win the rest of this season and not play Jordan Love. And now you have a quarterback who you now have maybe like 15 to 20 minutes of tape on.
Hmm.
And you have Aaron Rodgers there, which I mean, Aaron wanted to play as long as they were in the playoff hunt. And technically, they were in the playoff hunt until the end. So the
Hmm.
question's going to be, is he retiring? Is he going to get traded? Are they trading Jordan Love away and keeping Aaron because they need those picks to kind of offset some of the salary cap?
Yeah, I mean, we have to wait to see what happens. He didn't give his jersey to Jamison Williams, saying he wanted to keep it. So maybe that means he's retiring. I don't know.
I think it means Randall Cobb's retiring.
Maybe all his
Well,
BFF.
they were walking together out of the tunnel, so I think Randall Cobb might be the one that's retiring, and he's saving that for him. And I
Yeah,
don't think he wanted to disclose that without telling everybody. But Randall Cobb's at the end of his career, one of my favorite players because that was a guy who like I remember watching. When they had him and Jordy Nelson and those guys, it was such a good dynamic.
yeah,
And then Randall Cobb went to, I think it was the Raiders and just kind of fell off a cliff. So, that's one of those guys where he was very he was kind of like I'm trying to think like a guy who like him in his heyday was really good, and it's so weird that his cliff came so quick because he never really clicked to being that guy again. And I don't know if it's just the NFL got better at like defending those kind of guys because he was in the heyday of the slot receiver kind of deal. You had the outside guy taking the top off the defense, running a lot of
yeah.
11 personnel,
I
and
think the
at that
Raiders
time
just never
slot
had
receivers weren't great. The
I
slot
just feel
corners
like
weren't.
the Raiders never had a guy that allowed him to be the underneath guy.
Yeah, when
Like
he
you need that guy over the top to actually scare people.
yeah. And once he actually got back to once he got back to Green Bay, it was just kind of a little too late. He just kind of moved around a lot, didn't really do anything at any of those spots that he was at before. So I look at it like, but he was still only like in his late 20s at that point. So it was such a weird guy to have like a huge drop off on. But it was also knowing how to use him, and then also like I was saying before, I think defense slot corner is now a starting position in the NFL. Whereas back then it was like, when you're looking at the years of like Peyton Manning, it was really like a position that was like the best slot corner was like maybe Chris Harris, and that was it. And everybody else
Yeah.
was kind of like solid or okay. But if they were giving up a certain amount of yards through the slot, like that was considered good for a slot corner. So
Yeah,
it
like
feels like the slot corners have gotten so much better over the years.
it's a different position than what it was, when he was killing it. But so back to the Jets. So we know Wilson's a problem, and I think we just have to. Let's get to brass tacks. What do we have to do to make this team a real contender?
So you remember we were talking before about the mid quarterback situation?
Yeah,
They're not even at mid right now with Zach Wilson and Mike
they're
White and
they're
Joe Flacco.
they're the last, and they have the worst quarterback room in the league. Everybody
Yeah,
knows it.
yeah. So the question becomes, who like are you going to pay for Jimmy Garoppolo? Are you going to trade for Derek Carr? Because I don't think Aaron Rodgers ends up being available. I think Rodgers is going to either be a retirement thing or he stays in Green Bay because that's where now he stayed there for a year. They got he's now built up chemistry with Christian Watson. He's built up chemistry with Daubs. Maybe they spend some draft capital this year trying to get another dude, but like at this stage, you're almost better off trying to go ahead and double down on what you did because otherwise he should have been out of there last year if he knew Devontae Adams was leaving.
Yeah. So I think the first obviously you need to get a quarterback. And I
Yeah.
think literally anything is a step up. Literally anything.
Yeah.
You're winning. So once we're past the quarterback, I think the second mode of business is to obviously we need to revamp this O line. Because not only were we injured, when we were healthy, we were soft. We were
Yeah.
soft like baby shit.
Well, and it doesn't help that like there was no time where they were truly ever healthy. Like
Yes.
they started out the summer not healthy.
Yes.
They got to the start of the season and it was like we don't even have the backup to the backup at this point. So
Yeah.
I don't know when were they ever truly healthy?
Yeah. They never had health.
Now they need to get everybody back in the they also need to figure out like how to make sure everybody stays healthy.
Yeah.
You,
And I
you,
think
you
I
there?
think that this whole thing is um what we
Is it
do is
delusion? Oh,
we got a little sorry, we had some connection issues. So
yeah, there's some lag.
yeah, so what we have to do is I think Elijah Vera Tucker played good enough at tackle that you say Elijah Vera Tucker's the left tackle now. I think he's good enough. All right. You paid for Tomlinson. He's there. Might as well keep him there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're gonna get anything better than McGovern. I would love to get something better than Connor McGovern. He is not that great. He is not a great player, but he's good enough. So I
Mm-hmm.
think you resign that guy. All right. Um, I think Nate Herbig is also one of those where he's good enough. I think he played pretty damn good for being a waiver wire signing. Give him a small contract and have him come back. And then I think you draft another tackle in the draft. And then Mekhi Becton and Max Mitchell are fighting for swing tackle positioning. Mekhi Becton cannot touch this starting lineup. You cannot trust that guy.
Gotcha.
He has to prove that he can just be healthy.
So I kind of I think with Mekhi Becton, I think you want to make sure that he can even play.
Exactly.
So here's the thing, but part of that is he has to be competing for like an actual spot for you to know that he can play. Because you're not going to find out he can play if you're putting him in as a backup. I know they still have Dwayne Brown technically under contract for 2023. At least he knows he might be playing, so like he's not like before he was kind of on the bench and then came in midsummer.
Mhm.
So Fant's gonna probably be a guy who's going into free agency. Um, you're kind of looking at he looked good last year. There was talks about keeping him and extending him. The
Mhm.
injury issues kind of going on with him. Uh, when you look at how much the injuries kind of really screwed up their day, it's really hard to like, I do think there might be some answers as far as center goes going into free agency. If they wanted to move on from McGovern, uh, I think Ethan Posick, I think the guy who was on the Carolina Panthers, the what's his Bozeman,
Mhm.
both those guys played really well this year, and even and then Pat Elflein on the Carolina Panthers. Oh no, you guys don't want to touch Pat Elflein again. That
Yeah,
was a
no,
mistake the
we
first
don't
time
want that.
around.
We don't want
He did
that.
play better at center than he did at guard. So I'll say that. He probably is a guy who probably should never been playing guard for any team. He is a better starting center.
Yeah.
But I also don't think the Jets are looking to bring him back. But Ethan Posick, previously, on I think it was the Seahawks and on the Browns, he played pretty well both on both teams. He was on a 1-year deal with the Browns. And then also, like I was saying before, Bozeman, who started out on the Ravens, then went to the Carolina Panthers, played really well at both teams. Really good run blocker. I think those are your options possibly for upgrading. Because I do think those are good. I do think center is an important spot that like if you're not comfortable with the center situation, getting better at center, whether it's in the draft or via, signing somebody. I think signing somebody might be the better answer at this point. You already have Dwayne Brown there. You have Vera Tucker there. Um, I'm sure they were thinking of bringing back Fant, but who knows going into the offseason.
I don't see
Uh,
it happening.
yeah, I don't think they have to at this point. They survive. I don't know if they survived, but they did better than they probably were expecting without him this year. And I don't know what his contract is going out into the NFL ether anyway. I don't know what teams are looking at him and going like, yeah, we'll take that guy. When you have Becton in house, you have Brown in house, you have Vera Tucker, Tomlinson. I think again, like you said, you might as well just keep him there
Might as well
and
maybe restructure him if you could.
and bring in somebody to play center who maybe you might think is an upgrade, who is a scheme fit. And I think that might be the better way of handling it is keeping those guys in house because they also are going to come up on a cap issue eventually, especially if they are
Yeah.
signing a new quarterback or trading for a new quarterback.
Oh, we're gonna have to make some tough cuts. I don't think Corey Davis. I think he's a cap casualty. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
honest. I think,
I don't think that's a tough one though.
yeah, he's too injury prone. He's a good player. He's just injury prone. C.J. Mosley, in my opinion, is way over the hill. He needs to be restructured. Um, Carl Lawson probably needs to be restructured. Um,
Well, I think Carl Lawson's coming to the end of his deal. This is the last year of his deal.
yes, but we owe him. He's going to be a $15 million cap hit. If we can lower that, that would be really
Yeah.
useful. Um,
Oh yeah, if they come to him and say, "Listen, you didn't really play much the last 2 years. We're in the last year of the deal. You
yeah,
played
just
okay at the end."
guarantee his money, and don't let it hit the cap. You know,
Yeah,
like
that's
I
actually a good idea. They guarantee him it for the year. You feel more comfortable, but we lower your cap hit maybe by like 5 million. You get 10 million guaranteed compared to 15 million not guaranteed, and we can hang on to you until the end of training camp and then cut you. Which
yeah,
is that would really screw him the most is if they wait later and later and later to cut him, which they can basically do because again, he's got nothing left on his deal. He's got his prorated bonus. There's no workout bonus. There's no roster bonuses. So they could sit on
mhm.
him. And the Browns did this a couple years ago with Olivier Vernon. They did it last year with Jack Conklin. They had guys last years of their deal where they're not guaranteed. So you can kind of restructure these deals and get them to take a lower cap hit and you're getting guaranteed money and you're safe. You're not getting cut, getting traded for a pick or something mid-season to maybe a team that's like, hey, we'll trade you, we'll take on half the contract. You just turn half of his contract into a bonus and we'll give you a third round pick.
So I'm happy we're going to the defense now because I think um, we can do little things that'll make this defense so much better.
Yeah.
Um, our our linebackers and safeties are just not good enough, and I think we don't even have to spend that much money. I believe Jimmy Ward is a free agent this year.
I feel like he's a free agent every year.
I
So
feel like that's a very obvious thing to get to, that the Jets they should try and get Jimmy Ward. I think he would be a big upgrade for them. We got killed by running backs and by tight ends this year. We weren't getting beat by wide receivers.
yeah, I mean linebacker and safety. I mean that was the question coming into this year. That was why when you mentioned the Breece Hall pick, I was kind of the guy who was kind of more on the Jaquan Brisker track for that pick, and he did play well this year. Just
Mm.
like, but 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 I did think safety was going to be a question for them coming into this year. I know they had some linebacker. I know they had like former safeties they were turning into linebackers to try and do some things, but I agree. I think safety and linebacker, maybe getting faster guys, getting your Fred Warner type guy, getting your Darius Leonard kind of guy, getting your, like you said, you want to bring in Jimmy Ward, and that's a guy who has some of that ability to be a solid like cross between a slot guy, can be a very good safety to bring in there, and familiarity with the defense.
Yeah. And I think we do. I don't think we have. I mean, I like Quan Alexander, but I don't think we have any good linebackers. Mosley is over the hill. Quincy Williams doesn't know what's happening out there. Like he can't cover to save his life. He's just running, and he's athletic and he hits hard. But if there's ever a splash play with a running back, You can watch, it's Quincy Williams every time. They pick on him, you know? And I think the big thing that I would really like the Jets to get is we need a big fatty in the middle. You know, we need to put someone next to Quinnen that's going to eat double teams so we can stop the run because we always got gashed the entire year is we just got gashed with the run.
So that seems to be a funny thing because it feels like that's a trend that this year I think you're going to see a lot of teams do. I think that every year, but I think because I think it's starting to show that having those good D linemen help free up your back end. They free up your linebackers, they free up
Mm.
your safeties, and they can get a little bit cleaner tackles on guys. So a guy like an Andrew Billings, who might be a free agent, who is jumped around the league. Hankins was that way. The guy who used to be on the Giants went over to the Raiders. There's a bunch of those guys around the league who are like usually available for a couple $1 million. But if you think like to the Bengals, right? A lot of people make a lot of big deal about the Bengals defense, and the weird thing with the Bengals is their defense not great, but they're solid, and they've been playing better and better every year. And part of the reason why their defense is even functional is because of DJ Reader, a guy who they signed, in free agency a couple years ago, gave him a big D tackle, frees up everybody else. He
Mm.
made Larry Ogunjobi look good a couple years ago, and then
Yeah.
Larry Ogunjobi almost had a big contract, except for he, injured his, I think it was his knee or something last year, had to go to the Steelers and became a rotational piece with the Steelers. So those guys free up dudes like you're saying, Quinnen Williams, getting guys who can kind of rotate in on that defensive line. Is Quan Alexander a free agent this year?
He is a free agent. And I think we need to re-sign him. He was a revelation for this team. Without him, we would have been getting destroyed.
So my question is, how would you feel if they say cut CJ Mosley as like a June 1st designation and bring back Quan? Because I don't know if they could really afford two big linebacker contracts, especially when you try to look at designing a team's like salary cap structure. Having a lot of money into your linebackers is not always the best way of handling it.
Oh,
But having one of
I'm
those guys,
totally okay if CJ Mosley walks away. He was
gotcha.
not he was good for he's a leader and he was obviously important to the team's chemistry, but in terms of on field, that guy is way over the hill. He is slow. He's not like what he was in Baltimore. And you can see that obviously. I think I think we got to give the keys over to Jamie and Sherwood and see what happens, because let's be real, we don't have the draft capital to take a linebacker very high that can get into the lineup immediately. You've been grooming this kid for 2 years. He's been in the system for 2 years. Now is the time to see what's going to happen.
And
Now
not
is the
only that,
time.
but linebacker is a position you can get cheap on. And then you end up finding guys that end up being good, cheap free agent linebackers. Happened with Quan Alexander, but it can
Hmm.
also happen. I've seen it around the league where you get a guy who's like for $5 million for 1 year and they end up playing really well. So maybe there's a free agent dude that's kind of lingering out there that maybe knows their system pretty well, and they could bring him in for a 1 year deal to kind of like if one of those younger guys doesn't adapt as quick as they expect. And then again, like you extend Quan Alexander, you get rid of CJ Mosley, you get rid of that contract because, as a pre-June 1st cut, he's a $6 million cap savings. He's a $17 million cap savings if you cut him after June 1st.
Hmm.
So I don't know if they're really pushed for all that cap savings. It's really
I
more of
would.
the cash that you're freeing up.
Absolutely we take those $17 million. But we got 4 minutes. All
Yeah.
right. Uh, Draft talk. Bryce Young. Are you afraid of his size? I am. I'm terrified of his size. Too small.
Yes, but I think for the right team, if you're prepared for that, you might be able to get away with it. I think it's the Tua conundrum, right? This guy could be very good, but the health's going to come up, and if you're spending the first overall pick on the guy, you know, do you think he's going to survive the hits? I actually agree. Like the 189-pound thing kind of worries me a little bit with that. It's kind of it was what I was saying with Zach Wilson. Now I think Bryce Young is better as a prospect than Zach Wilson, and so it becomes a question of how like how much do you weigh the good prospect versus the injury risk kind of deal? I also think a lot of people thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be a big injury risk too.
Yeah,
Not as much because obviously Bryce Young, the other problem is he's not exactly the tallest guy in the world, but he's athletic. Again, 189 is not going to be it's not the, you want somebody over 200 pounds typically.
he's not 200 pounds.
Yeah. And that's kind of the problem. And I agree. I think that's the slight build is going to, might ding him in the evaluation portfolio, but, but again, I think it's the Tua Tagovailoa syndrome. It's what do you do when the guy is so good at the things you really want?
Yeah.
You
All
know,
right, we got to keep going.
yeah,
We got to keep going. Okay,
yeah.
Brian Brzee, boom or bust? Where are you at, Brian Brzee? I'm
That one I
boom.
have to do more evaluation
I
on. I'm
like
not at that
I like
stage.
Brian Brzee. I think he's
Gotcha.
going to be a good player. What else do we got? Who were the Jets taking if they're taking a draft selection today? They're number 13.
Oh, I don't. They're. I think they trade that pick, but
They trade that pick. Okay.
I I think they're trading that pick for somebody because unless they get Jimmy Garoppolo as a free agent, and if they do that, then my guess would be probably whoever's the best safety on the board. So I'm going to put, if I'm going position, I'm going to go say maybe the best safety that's on the board. And if not that, maybe edge rusher, if there's a
Edge
good one there.
rusher. I could see it. I could see it.
Because Jermaine Johnson's been good, but again, like we were saying before, they might move on from Carl Lawson, or they're going to try to reduce his cap hit. And
Yeah.
you're going to want a future beyond Carl Lawson on that D line that, again, keeps that defensive line very good. So I think edge is very possible. I think safety is very possible because I think they like safeties in that scheme. And I mean, I'm always nowadays I'm becoming more and more of a slut for just drafting as many good offensive linemen and as many good receivers as possible.
You're
I just
you're
don't think there's
speaking my language.
I like those positions. I don't know who's a good offensive lineman to take at that spot at this stage. Haven't really done those deep dives yet, so I don't know what that would be at 13. The one
Look at the Paris
receiver,
Johnson tape. That guy, he's got the tools. The tape isn't there, but the tools are there. Um, okay, well, I'm trying to think of the guy. Trenton Simpson. Do you know about Trenton Simpson?
and again, I'm very late on this because usually I have to wait till the guys declare before I'm starting to really do any kind of jumps on anybody to look on guys. Unless I'm like super excited for somebody, then I start looking at them.
All right, we got 1 minute. Who's your guy in the draft? Who's your guy?
Well, I like the Ohio State wide receiver, but that's not saying
Oh,
much.
Jackson Smith. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's
but
great.
but I know he had a little bit of a down year this year, but again, I think that's a dude that. But I don't have a guy yet because again, I'm not as up to date on this draft as maybe I have been on other drafts before.
Yeah.
But I again, like I said before, big on offensive line, big on wide
All right,
receiver as
Walter.
just
We got a plug.
as a
Throw
pickup.
your plugs before this ends.
You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch is a delicious drink you drink in the summer. I'm on Let's Talk Sports on Fridays. And Face Off of Facemire on Thursdays. And you can find Draft Vice anywhere. I don't know, YouTube's, things like that.
Hell yeah. He's a very funny comic. He's super good. He knows his football. He called Garrett Wilson, guys. He called Garrett Wilson.
I'm the only guy who